And welcome to the Great Deception Podcast. I'm your host, Matt. Thanks for joining me. Guys, I'm really inspired right now after last night's Monday Night Master Debaters, where I had the great Tartaria Ann on, as well as Old Scary World with my buddy Ryan from Dangerous World, of course, my partner in crime. We had a blast. Talking about it just opened up so many different things in my brain. It was going off left and right, and there's so many things I want to get out there. So what I'm going to start doing is putting out these shorter episodes that are not scripted. I haven't written up anything for them. I'm just kind of going off the cuff. I have a couple videos I want to show you, and I want to take you through some pictures and just talk about a few things. And this one's basically about the destruction in the 1800s and what the hell happened and the narrative that we're given and some questions I have about it. And what this is leading into is a series that I'm going to do with my buddy Casey. You guys might know him as Golden Gate Starfort Command on Instagram. If you don't, and YouTube also. If you don't, go follow him. It's Golden Gate is one word _, Starfort _ command. Guy does great work. He's in the Bay Area, and we're gonna talk about San Francisco and what's going on there and the narrative that we've been given versus what we really think took place, right? So it's going to be good. It's going to be fun. I've been going through San Francisco now for the last couple weeks, and it's driving me insane because they had a World Fair in 1894. Or they had a fire before that. Right after it started, they had a fire. Then 1894, they had this big World Fair. Not supposed to be many people, only like 40 years after the gold rush. And then 1906, supposedly this earthquake and fire that looks just like, 9/11, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Dresden, make your comparisons. But it looks like a war zone. And then you have the 1915 World Fair. And then there's all sorts of crazy stories in between. And I'll get into that with Casey. But first, I want to thank our newest patron, Donna. I want to welcome you aboard and thank you very much for your contribution to the show. Guys, if you want to join the Patreon, go to patreon.com / The Great Deception Podcast. I got a couple different tiers out there. Every month we're going to have a call. Actually, this one's going to be September 30th, and I'll make a post out there to all you, and we're going to try and grow the Patreon a little bit as far as content wise, get some more stuff out there for you also. And these shows like this will be some more of those that go out there. And you're going to want to watch this, guys. This is kind of a very visual episode. So I will put the video up on YouTube as long as it'll stay there. It will be on Spotify on the video side, on audio on all the other podcasts, and then it'll be up on the video on Patreon also. So another good reason to go get the Patreon. Couple bucks a month, you get some good content. You get all the Monday Night Master Debaters videos. And Donna, welcome aboard. Thank you very much. So other than that, guys, there's some great podcasts going on out there. I mean, my buddy Moral Bob and Drew Misson from You're Missing the Point are just killing it. They're doing a series on the Truman Show over on the Hidden Pod or Hidden in Plain Sight podcast. Sorry, he's Hidden Pod at Instagram. But yeah, go check that out. That's awesome. If you're into conspiracies and symbolism in movies, they're doing a great job breaking down. So far, they've done Truman Show. They just did The Mask and Liar Liar. A lot of fun. And then also on Upstate Unconventional and the Red Thread podcast, you can check out Nico and Randy are doing a similar thing with Lord of the Rings. They've done 2 episodes on the first 2 movies of Lord of the Rings. 2 of my favorite podcasts right there are those series. So go check them out. And then Ryan over at The Dangerous World, he's doing so much I don't know how the hell he does it all, but some great content coming out of there. I know he's putting some YouTube stuff out too, so go check out his YouTube channel. And he's got some of the best merch in the game. So go check out his merch at Dangerous World Podcast, right? Go check out his Instagram. I know he's got a link in there to all that stuff. So go check those out. Guys, in the Monday Night Master Debaters, we got some good ones coming up. There's been some great discussions over this summer. I'm really happy with the way that show's going. So thank you all for giving us some good feedback. Hey, if you want to see something or have someone you want on the show, feel free to hit me up on DM on Instagram at the Great Deception Podcast. You can get me there anytime. So let's get to this. We have the destruction in the 1800s. Okay, so this is something that it's like out of a horror movie, or just like a sci-fi movie where Godzilla is down and roaming the land and just wreaking havoc, just destroying buildings, turning them into dust. All sorts of crazy shit going on in cities and suburbs alike. But what's causing it are supposedly it's just unimaginable amount of fires. Okay, it seems like every major city in the 1800s has a major, if not one, two, possibly three fires. New York, San Francisco, St. Louis, on and on and on. There's all these fires, all these buildings are destroyed. Now, after coming off the old world discussion last night and talking about, the T word, Tartaria, right? I'm not big on throwing Tartaria around, but it's a concept, right? We're not talking about that individual piece of land. We're talking about the concept of the worldwide potential civilization, or at least a worldwide sharing of information and technology, because in architecture, because there's so many similarities all over the world at a time when travel, granted, there was travel around the world, but it was limited. So for these guys to be traveling, and for the amount of buildings that we see, beautiful buildings, brick buildings, stone buildings, some we're told are, plaster and wood. They're amazing. The cathedrals, the star forts, you look at all the Capitol buildings, the city halls, these buildings, some of the mansions are just off the charts, but they're all destroyed. They're all wiped out. And we're told that in a time when they had no power tools, granted, they were mining, they were making bricks, they were making glass, but it wasn't on a scale that we're doing it today. I mean, they were making bricks at a high level, especially in the mid to late 1800s. They were cranking them out. But these things were before then. A lot of these buildings, most of these buildings. And so they took craftsmen that knew what they were doing. This whole concept of slave labor building the pyramids, right? Or slave labor building these insane buildings. It's not happening. Okay, you have to have skilled craftsmen that are leading these projects and are on the ground. You can't just have slaves. Yeah, you can have slaves hauling the materials to and from the site. Fine, I buy that. But who's doing the work? Who are all these master craftsmen that are doing the actual work? And that's where the story has holes and inconsistencies. But then after all these structures are around, right, and we've talked about it before, the possibility that all of these structures work together in harmony. They are, a lot of these cities are placed on ley lines, which some of you, if you're not familiar with ley lines, are these it's part of the Earth's energetic grid, right? There's these lines on the Earth that are said to have significant, energetic value. And so significant power, maybe not to us today, but to those who know how to harness the energy from the Earth, that was there, and that's why they set up these cities in these locations back in the day. Okay, and we're going to look at the destruction of these cities, the massive amounts of fires, earthquakes. Like, we're talking in this century alone, we're talking about events that, you know, are 1,000-year events, but they're happening back to back to back to back in this time frame. Right. And it starts off right away in the early 1800s. You have Tecumseh's Comet, right, which is this comet, or Napoleon's Comet, depending on whether you're in Europe or North America. It's this comet that went around for a year. And then following it was the New Madrid earthquake, which I did an episode on that previously. So you can go check that out, because that's just a crazy story in itself. But to sum it up, there was a series of earthquakes. We're talking over 1,000 earthquakes in a couple months span in New Madrid, Missouri, and that surrounding area. And, you know, on one day, the earthquakes were so significant, they caused the Mississippi River to change directions for 3 days. Think about the power of that, what that must have been like. And then there was ensuing liquefaction, which is essentially a mud flood. Okay, and we think about things, and we see these even in the destruction here. You just see these massive piles of dirt, mud, rubble. Now, we're talking a time when there weren't earth movers that we know of. Right? They had ways of doing it with pulleys and things like that, but there were no bulldozers, no excavators, no heavy machinery. So what moved all this dirt? And we're going to look at some of these things and some of these disasters, but I want to take a look first at this this video here by Stolen History. Okay, and it's like a minute long, and they do a great job of kind of summarizing overview of what we're looking at here, and the destruction that took place. And they're going to look mainly, I think, at World War II here.
Two world wars appear in a new light. The colonization of the world took place later than we are told, only in the 1700s. By the early 1900s, most of the world was under the control of the European elite-controlled colonial powers, primarily England, France, the Netherlands, Spain, Belgium, Portugal, Russia, Italy. These nations were all already infiltrated by secret societies. Then, with the two world wars, European culture itself was largely destroyed, and as a result, people were deprived of the ability to remember. The wars created a collective trauma that made it difficult to connect with the pre-war period. If we look at the earliest photographs from the former colonies, particularly India, we see a world in ruins and people who are not suited to the structures in which they live. These photos resemble 18th and 19th century landscapes of Europe. If we ignore the official timeline for a moment, we can entertain the thought that our world was laid in ruins not too long ago, and that this event allowed parasitic forces to establish a new world order. This new world order is still in the making and has as its goal the complete uprooting of man from his being and his history.
Okay, so there you have it. And that coincides with what? The Industrial Revolution. Okay. So we start looking at that, and then what we're going to get into next is we're going to start looking at the fires. Okay. We're going to look at the destruction. And what we have here is a video of a fire from 1904, some actual footage. Okay. And Bill has a very interesting take on things and the devastation that took place. Okay, so what Stolen History was saying there was that basically the world wars were intentional, and part of the, you know, there was obviously a war that took place, but part of the side game was to eliminate and destroy the infrastructure of the previous order, right? He says this new world order is overtaking. And that's, you hear that term a lot. I think it's overused. But at the same time, that is essentially what they're trying to set up. It's they want to you in the one world order mindset, right? And that's not how things operate. Now, in an ideal society, yes, we're all humans, right? We're all on this same realm together. We should all work together, and we should work with nature. But that's part of their plan. Part of their plan is to separate us from nature, to divide us from anything divine, right? They don't want you believing in God. They don't want you having faith in anything. They don't want you close to nature. They don't want you growing your own food. They want you dependent on their system, because their world is run by tangible, right? Consumer system. We're not, humans aren't meant to be in this consumer-based system. We're not meant to be in the rat race that we're in. We're not meant to work these long hours, not having vacations, being in a box all day, not being in the sun, not getting enough exercise, not eating properly. We're just poisoning ourselves. So let's take a look at this video on the 1904 fire and what he has to say about the firefighters.
This is rare footage of the Great Vancouver Fire of 1904. We can see how intense the fires can be. We also see the fire brigade in action during the event and afterwards. Can a conventional fire burn down buildings made of steel, brick, and stone? Or would a propellant need to be applied to achieve more destructive results? These buildings are fully engulfed in flames with the contents inside providing the fuel. Or was there an accelerant applied to the building either before or during the event? We can faintly make out something being sprayed out of the hoses. We typically assume that's water. Could they be spraying fuel onto the fire? As we've established, the members of the fire brigade were well-trained military men with expertise in explosives and weaponry. Could these events be military exercises?
These are stone buildings. For those that aren't watching, or that are listening, these are stone buildings.
We've looked into the role of the fire brigade at these types of events. In this section, we'll consider other weapons taken from the historical record.
So zooming in on one soldier that's tipping his
What's
cap
going
and
on here in
smiling.
this photograph? This is very suspicious. The fire brigade member in the upper right, men huddled around a smoking box in the middle of the debris. Is this some type of weapon that they're using? Is this part of the destructive force? What caused all of this destruction? Are we looking at the results of a weapon or technology that isn't known to the general public?
These are steel
What are we
frame
looking at?
buildings with brick.
Where are the flame marks? Should black burn marks be present? Throughout history, we see many similar events. Numerous old world cities have been destroyed by fire, war, or other forces. This appears to be a repeating script with similar actors and similar equipment. For example, Boston, Massachusetts reportedly burned down in 1872. We can theorize that there is a concerted effort to destroy the old world, city by city, building by building. Whoever is controlling these events has the resources to carry out this destruction all across the face of the earth, decade after decade, century after century. By using the cover story of war or fire or natural events, the control mechanism that's in place is systematically causing the destruction of the old world ways and the old world architecture.
So there you have it. Okay. He makes some great points there. Now, these firemen back then were ex-military, right? So what they're going to be is they're going to have explosive expertise. So he's saying, you know, obviously they needed that because there was a massive amount of controlled demolition that needed to be done with the rubble. But even still, he makes a good point there that were these firefighters putting out the fire, or were they expanding it? Were they literally throwing fuel on the fire? I don't know. It's an interesting idea, but the idea that he put out there of this controlled demolition, okay, it's a very, very reasonable concept, because you think about it. Why would they do it? Okay, that's the question. Why? Well, as they said before, they wanted to reset. They wanted things their way. And they're going to get rid of the old buildings. That way they can put in new stuff. And look what they put in its place. It's comical, guys. It's just meant for the rat race. There's no aesthetic value to these buildings. They're strictly to make money. And that's part of the reason why they destroyed the old world infrastructure, because then they could replace it with this new, literally called brutal architecture. Okay. It's awful. It's bland. It's square. It's boring. But we had all this great stuff. And look at these cities where there were great fires. Okay. We had 1805, Detroit. Okay. You have, and I'm mainly looking at the US here. I'm going to call it a couple of the other ones, because the interesting one here is the Great Fire of Moscow of 1812, where the Russians intentionally set Moscow on fire so Napoleon couldn't take it. Go look into that. Why would you, in what instance in history would you ever burn down the infrastructure? Like, obviously you would destroy roads, you would destroy airport runways, railroad tracks, things like that. But entire cities, Capitol buildings included, everything, your entire infrastructure, we're just going to raise it to the ground rather than let them have it. I mean, you obviously don't think you can win it back. Otherwise, you'd let them take it and then just retake it. But that's an interesting one. And then we get into the War of 1812 over here, and we had a massive fire in Buffalo in 1813, York in Upper Canada 1813, 1814 Washington D.C. Okay, 1813 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, there's a massive fire. Up and down. We get into the 1820s, you have the Great Savannah Fire, which burned down 500 structures, okay? About $4 million worth of damage. You have the Great Fire of Fayetteville, where 500 buildings are burned in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Augusta, Georgia, hundreds of buildings destroyed, 1829. All right, we're in the 1830s, Fayetteville. No, it's Fayetteville, North Carolina. Okay, this time. So destroyed hundreds of buildings and almost completely leveled the city. 1835, the second Great Fire of New York City. They didn't even mention the first Great Fire of New York City on this list. That's how, how many fires there are, guys. 1838, Charleston, South Carolina, over 1,000 buildings damaged. Let me maximize this here, make it a little easier to see. Okay, so now we go to Great New York City Fire of 1845. It's almost like a decade happenstance. 345 buildings are destroyed. Great Fire of Pittsburgh in 1845. Over 1,000 buildings are destroyed. 1848, the second Great Fire of St. John's destroyed about 2,000 buildings and left 12,000 homeless. Okay, Ohio, Medina, Ohio, destroyed the entire business district in 1848. St. Louis, the Great Fire of St. Louis of 1849. There's a Great Fire in Toronto in 1849. We go to the 1850s, San Francisco, okay? 1851, guys, and this is why I'm so 1850, 1848, we're told there's 1,000 people in San Francisco. By 1849, 1850, there's 25,000 or so. 2,000 buildings are destroyed in 1851. That's got to be a massive amount of the city is destroyed in 1851. Okay, they're just going to rebuild, I guess. Montreal Fire of 1852. Then we're going to get to the 60s. Troy, New York, 671. Again, these Troy, Buffalo. Now we get to the Civil War. We have Charleston. City of Charleston is burnt. Atlanta. These are all burned by Sherman, right? We have Columbia, South Carolina. Richmond, Virginia is burned, much like the Russians, by the retreating Confederates, but they weren't planning on holding it. They were just burning it because they didn't want to take it to have anything. We go to 1866, the Great Portland Fire of Portland, Maine. Destroyed the commercial district and left 10,000 homeless. 1870s. Now you guys want, I mean, we'll probably eventually do a whole episode on 1871, but the Great Fire of 1871. Okay, there's several, it says strong winds led several simultaneous fires in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois on October 8th and 9th. Now, mind you, this is all around a lake. So the fire is apparently blowing across the lake. Makes sense. Lake Michigan, mind you. So you had the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 is downtown Chicago on October 8th. And that one was said to be started, right, by the cow that tipped over a candle with her tail and started this massive fire that killed 250 people. Likely story. On the same day, mind you, a couple hundred miles north in Wisconsin, in Peshtigo, the Peshtigo Fire of 1871, several towns were destroyed in a firestorm that reached Michigan. 1,500 to 2,500 dead, millions of acres were burned. Like, I think it was 1.1 million acres, something like that, were burned. Then on the same day, the Great Michigan Fire of 1871. And that was a series of simultaneous fires. The most prominent one was the Port Huron Fire, which killed over 200. And there was over 1 million acres burned in Michigan as well. So right there on that day, there was over 2 million acres burned. And we're led to believe that it started in Chicago over a cow tipping over a candle. And then it spread across Lake Michigan. Right? This makes no sense. It's all on the same day. Millions of acres are burned. And I guarantee you most people have never even heard of this because it was new to me and I was into history and stuff like this. Okay, so 1871, crazy fires around Lake Michigan. What is it? What's causing this? It's obviously not just a coincidence. Are we talking some sort of weaponry? Was it Greek fire? Was this intentional destruction? We'll never know. But there's some things to think about, because it just doesn't seem right that you would have fires like this in this small proximity. And we're told basically it was started by a cow tipping over a candle. Good likely story. Now let's go to 1872. You got the Great Boston Fire. All right, that destroyed 776 buildings and killed at least 20 people. Then you have another great fire in Chicago of 1874. It was very similar to 1871 fire, but stopped by new fireproof wall. It destroyed 812 structures and killed 20 people. So after the massive destruction in 1871, Chicago gets hit again in 1874. All right. And why? Why are they clearing out all this space in these cities? Think about it. Then we had the Great Whiskey Fire in Dublin, okay, in Ireland. 13 people killed. It destroyed a malt house, a bonded warehouse. Damn. R.I.P. 1877, Paris, Texas, the first of 3 fires that destroyed most of the town. Again, guys, we're seeing it over and over. It's not just one fire. Let's go on to the 1880s. We have the Thumb Fire in Michigan, burned over 1 million acres during a drought and killed 282. Sounds a lot like a decade prior. We have the Great Seattle Fire of 1889, destroyed the Central Business District. Okay, the Great Fire of Lynn, Massachusetts of 1889, destroyed about 100 buildings and took over 2 weeks to put out. St. John's in Newfoundland, 1892. We've got Clarksville, Virginia in 1893. The fire destroyed many blocks between the river and 5th Street in the historical commercial core. You had the Great Hinckley Fire in Minnesota. It was a firestorm that destroyed several towns and killed 400 people, over 400 in 1894. Paris, Texas, 1896, the second of 3 fires that destroyed much of the town. We're looking at Park City, Utah, 1898. Excuse me. Then we get into early 1900s, and it's even crazier. Baltimore Fire, 1904. All right, I'm going to show you some pictures of that. You tell me, and we're going to decide, is this Baltimore, or we're going to play a little game. Is this Baltimore, or is this America, or is this World War II? Because you can't tell the difference. It's utter devastation. It does not look like just a fire. All right, you have Yazoo City, Mississippi on May 25th, 1904, destroyed the entire business district, 125 buildings. 1906, you have the San Francisco earthquake and fire. All right, and I'm going to stop there. Actually, I'm going to go one more. You have 1911, Bangor, Maine. Shout out to Maine. Great Fire, 1911, destroyed hundreds of buildings. All right, and that's where we're going to stop for now, because I don't want to get too far into the 1900s, because I'm stuck in the 1800s, ladies and gentlemen. So what we're going to look at is, where did that folder go? There we go. All right. List of great fires. Okay, we just looked at that. Now, here's an interesting, actually, I want to go this way. Let's go back. And we're going to go to, oops, no, go away. Come on. Now I'm going to do it. All right, so here we go, okay? It says, Leo DiCaprio, as narrator of Gangs of New York, called them amateur firefighters. says Winkle. To say they are volunteers is more accurate because even today, the majority of firefighters are still volunteer, but nobody would call them amateurs. That can also be applied to volunteers in the 1840s into the 1860s. They were as trained as the technology of the time allowed. This is talking about the firefighters. American firefighting began to evolve into a system of fraternal organizations, similar to the Masons or the Oddfellows. The volunteer firefighters of the early period are sort of the most virtuous members of the early republic. They're establishing themselves as manly heroes with mottos in Latin, hearkening back to republics of old. Goes, as the buildings grew taller, stronger steam-powered pumps were needed. Those required fewer but better trained firefighters to operate. Shrinking sizes of the fire companies was somewhat of a social problem. Volunteer fire companies existed to do more than just fight fires. These organizations served as fraternal organizations as well as fire companies, says Winkle. The reason you joined a fraternal society in this period was things like death benefits for your family after you die, because there was no social safety net. Okay. So now, what do we have here? Well. Do we have the United States, or is this a fire in the early 19th or early 20th century, or is this World War II? Okay. And this is World War II. So now let's move on to the next one. This, I know this one all too well. This is, folks, Chicago, 1871. Look at the devastation. What do we have here? This is Dresden in World War II. And what do we have here? This is Baltimore in 1904. All right, we're looking at just pure and utter devastation. Now, let's look at Hiroshima. Let's look at Chicago. Not too much difference, and it's amazing how one building stood out of all these. Here we go, another blast site in, is this Hiroshima or Nagasaki? This is one of them. I don't know which. I apologize. And again, same thing. Look at the aftermath. This is after a quote unquote nuclear blast. All right, what do we have here? This is World War II disaster in Dresden. Look at that devastation, okay? Look at the piles of the rubble they had to make to clear away. And this is after time, right? They've had time to clear away and everything like that. But just the utter devastation. Look how massive these buildings were. Look how amazing these buildings. I mean, this one right here, this tower over here, it just split it in half. It's still standing. Look how thick that is. How long would this take to make? And why don't we make things like that today? Look at St. Louis, 1849 fire. Look at that devastation. Okay. Is it much different than what we see in World War II, carpet bombings? No. No. Just look at the devastation. And this is an interesting little meme here. Okay. San Francisco in 1906. We see similar destruction in every major city throughout the world. And this is hinting at possible direct energy weapons or some sort of frequency weapons that may be used. I don't know. We'll have to see. So we have here, all right. This is, I believe, just looking at the devastation. Okay. Now, one of the things we're going to see a lot, it's not only the destruction, but then you're going to also see people posing with it, almost proud, like they were a part of this. I mean, when we look at this devastation, guys, look how far the rubble's falling. I mean, obviously they've moved some of it here, but look at all the people out there. Some were looters. Some were there to clean up and help out. Some were there just to oversee. almost look like a hunter looking at their kill, posing with their kill. Right? It seems like these guys here. And notice, what do we have over here on the right hand side? We have a gentleman standing on the rubble with his hand in his pocket. What do we have here? A gentleman with his hand in his jacket. Okay, we have another with the hands behind the back. All symbols, guys. These pictures tell us a lot more than just about, they tell us the intent. Who is responsible? It's the inheritors, right? Them. Look at this, just devastation. Again, this is Chicago. Boston. Okay, I mean, just look, and just a random guy sitting there posing, right? And at this time, you had to sit there for, I mean, not considerable amount of time. I'm sure they had some quick exposure. I'm no photography expert. And one of the things that we will show you when we start digging into San Francisco with Casey a little bit is some possible photoshopping or playing around with the photos, because I don't know how many of you are familiar with this term. We talked about it last night on Master Debaters, but vanilla sky, right? The vanilla sky effect, where you'll have a picture where the foreground is crystal clear, and then all of a sudden you get to about sky level and everything's white. And you can see in some of the photos where they've actually manipulated the photo to cut out what was in the sky. Why would they do that? It just leads to more speculation. There's no answers, but it just leads to more questions. And look at, I mean, the devastation is worldwide, guys. Amazing. Just look at the devastation to these buildings. For what? Why? Because they had to go. They were in the way. They were not part of the plan. They served no purpose to these parasites. Okay, look at this. People picking up bricks by hand in the rubble, just moving it. This guy just, sitting on a severed statue head. Kind of looks like Lincoln almost. He's just chilling on it, hanging out, posing in the aftermath of utter devastation. I mean, you just see rubble all over the train tracks. Train tracks are unusable at this time, covered in debris. So now here's an interesting idea. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this, but they had rockets for the War of 1812. So they had heavy ones, they called them being carcass or explosive rockets, 100 and 300 pounders between 5 and 6 feet in length, with a stick length of 25 to 27 feet. It's like basically, the stick was, it's like a giant bottle rocket is what these things look like. These were considered too cumbersome to use effectively in the field, they said. So you had the medium rockets, being from 42 to 24 pounders, 2 to 4 feet in length, stick length of 15 to 20 feet. The 32 pounder was generally used for longer range bombardment. The light rocket, being from 18 to 6 pounders, 16 to 25 inches in length, with a stick of 8 to 14 feet. The 12-pound case shot was generally used for support infantry and cavalry, with extreme range of some 2,000 yards. The rockets could be fired from a wheeled bombarding frame, from a portable tripod, or even from a shallow trench or a sloping bank, which is very interesting. So we look here, and this is them firing a cannon. Cannons are obviously, but look in the background. We have a little rocket launcher, a little missile launcher. And supposedly they had the ability to submerge a vehicle, a submarine, and shoot a rocket. In 1834, we're told that the Russians were able to do this. Okay, and they had all this different powder and everything that they could use. So where is it? So here, we're going to talk about Greek fire for a second. Because when you think about the way these buildings burned, and you think about what Bill Miller said in his video, by adding an incendiary to the fire, Greek fire is one of those things that was never really figured out, so to speak. There's a lot of people who've attempted it, but they just don't really know for sure. There's no recipe left behind. So let's look what we have here. Greek fire was one of the most effective thermal devices, although it was extremely dangerous for the users. A combustible liquid, it could be shot from siphons or catapults and burst into flames on impact. First developed by the Byzantines in the 7th century, it was later used by the Turks during the Crusades, and probably first used in Western Europe in the 12th century. Early experiments by the Byzantines in the 6th century used a mixture of sulfur and oil, which would have been terrifying if not destructive. Various versions seem to have existed, and the recipes were frequently kept secret. Experts today debate the exact composition, although some recipes are known. It probably had regional variations. The Islamic derivatives were known as naft and had a petroleum base with sulfur. The Persian word for petroleum is, and it gives it in Arabic, which you can't speak. The combustible liquid could be shot from catapults and would burst into flames on impact. Siphons, frequently of copper, were also developed, first appearing in the 10th and 11th centuries. The siphons could shoot a blazing stream, with the 10th century Mesopotamian source claimed could engulf 12 men. Marty bin al-Tarasi wrote a military manual for Saladin in the 12th century, suggested the naft could be placed inside blown eggshells, which could be thrown from horseback. So they're making like Greek fire grenades. From the 12th century, mouth-blown tubes were developed for use in mines. Similar petroleum and bitumen-based incendiary mixtures had been known for centuries before the invention of Greek fire, but for this new recipe created a blaze which extremely difficult to extinguish. It burned on water and was effective in naval warfare, although it was primarily an anti-personnel weapon rather than a ship burner. It remained effective at sea even after its use had declined on land after the 13th century. All right, so now why do I bring up Greek fire? Well, I didn't know that, shoot, where'd it go? Let's see, now we got to find the Greek fire. We got to get back there. Where is the Greek fire? No. But I didn't know that there was Greek fire here in America. Okay. So we're going to look at, I think it was the Civil War. They had Greek fire. How crazy is that? I never taught that in history class. Okay. Let's see. Where is the Greek fire? We are way far away. All right, back at the beginning. Here we go. Guys, this is a disaster. I apologize. Here we go. Okay, so the Greek fire. So it said pouring oil was used in historic battles, and Josephus described it as Jatapada in AD 67, saying the oil did easily run down the whole body from head to foot under the entire armor and fed up upon their flesh like the flame itself. Okay, so they used this Greek fire as a major weapon. Now, this caught me by surprise. It was used in the Civil War. Okay, the Civil War saw a significant use of chemical weapons, at least in incipient form. Union forces used variants of Greek fire, essentially incendiary mixtures that were hard to extinguish and could, in some cases, float on water. It says, I classify Greek fire as a chemical weapon because the formulations, when ignited, released large volumes of noxious fumes, and this was considered a useful collateral effect, said Guy R. Hasegawa, a Civil War researcher. Greek fire was most notably used during the sieges of Vicksburg, Mississippi, and Charleston, South Carolina. So there, it was used against cities in America during the 1860s. Okay, so it said, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what we want to say because it is some of this Greek fire. Because it doesn't seem like they wanted it to go out. Okay, this person claims that there was a nuclear weapon used in 1817 in Tartaria. But look, I mean, look at these buildings. They're just fully engulfed. And we're told for the most part, a lot of these structures are brick. Granted, they had some wood interior, yeah. But these are brick structures. And this fire is just bouncing around, just spreading. I mean, this just devastated this city. You have what you have is shells of buildings, right? As we look at these. And this one is Nantucket in 1845. Okay, this is Pittsburgh in 1845, the aftermath of the Great Pittsburgh Fire. Now, this is the Alabama Capitol Fire in 1849. And I see this is interesting because look at this. I mean, you have this beautiful Capitol here at the end, and it kind of, has a White House feel to it, but it's up like a dirt hill. There's just some horses and wagons, and there's, it's wavy. It's not even like a flat dirt hill, like a road. It's a wavy hill that they, almost like a flood. And because this building is up on the top and almost like a mud flood. You look at some of these buildings, it doesn't look even. Just looks off. This is St. Louis in 1849. Just utter devastation from a fire. Now, all these fires, as we look at the damage, I mean, there's just people hanging out watching the fire too in a lot of these, right? Just crowds gathering around, just watching their towns burn, not doing anything. Nope. We're just going to watch it burn. It's just, this is St. Louis in 1857, the second St. Louis fire. Charleston, South Carolina, 1861. Gee. We just heard what happened. Greek fire was used. Well, is that any different than some of these other buildings that we're going to see? I mean, just remember that because it's just look at the devastation. There's a possibility that it was something more. And this is the Fort Sumter attack in 1861, where you look at the damage from a cannon, right? It barely made pockmarks on this building. Building didn't even flinch from all the cannon fire. But what got it? Eventually. The cannons ended up breaking. It's comical. But just look at the devastation. Those are bombs? Or are they cannons? Or was it a mixture? Because some of these are just straight pockmarks. Others are almost like missiles or projectiles were shot. And then you look at the after effects and it's just rubble. I mean, look at that pile up there. It looks like a dirt pile, which was once stone. Where have we seen buildings turn to dust from stone before? This picture's iconic. Just a guy chilling on a cannon head, that just blew off. There's a cannonball sitting out in front of it. He's just sitting in rubble. devastation. I mean, the fence is like blown over. It's just, I mean, these are wild scenes, guys. I can't really understand the true scope of these, what the smells would be like here, what the sounds would be like, what it would take to destroy these places like this. I mean, this is utter devastation. This is supposedly from bombardment, right? Not aerial. This is 1860s, so there's nothing dropping bombs from above. This is all from cannon fire, allegedly. And we're looking at the Battle of Bull Run where a train derailed. But look at the devastation from quote unquote fire. Look at the cannon, the size of the cannon just broke off. There's some people that would say that these didn't necessarily always, all of them didn't necessarily shoot cannonballs. Some of them were frequency weapons. I don't know about that. I've looked at it a little bit. I think it's an interesting concept. Especially when you think about the size of these balls that they were said to have shot, the amount of force that it must have taken. I don't know. I don't have a physics major, but let's take a look at some more devastation here. And what do we got here? We got some more from Fort Sumter, right? This is Atlanta in 1864. And you just look and it's just pure waste. Virginia, look at all the cannonballs. Just massive amounts of cannonballs. This is an old star fort in Alabama, Fort Morgan. I mean, look at it, burned out. Still standing. She's standing tall. You can't just burn her out with fire. Look at that. Didn't even flinch. The interior is probably destroyed, not the exterior. Here you have a lighthouse in Mobile. Look at I mean, they just, why a lighthouse, right? What significance did that lighthouse? I mean, unless it was holding munitions possibly, but I don't know. I mean, it's just comical. And of course, in this picture, if you look over here to the left-hand side, you will of course see your typical men in black with the black hats admiring the leftover work. So it's again here, Norfolk Navy Yard. You got a guy just posing with the rubble, black hat, all cool. Pennsylvania, 1864. Again, look, just rubble everywhere. This is in Missouri, 1864, the ruins of Falkland, the home of Montgomery Blair Silver Spring, Missouri. We get into Sherman's March, right? And that was in March of 1866, where he basically went through Georgia and laid waste. And North Carolina, too. I mean, just look at what he did. Why? I mean, I understand blowing up the railroad, right? That makes sense. But look at this. The South was just destroyed. Look at these guys bending railroad ties. Supposedly, yeah, they would give Sherman's necktie, right? They would take the railroad tracks and wrap them around a tree or a telephone, you know, a pole. I don't know about that. That sounds like a myth to me. But hey, this is what they're illustrating here. Again, our famous guy with the blown out cannon head just chilling on the cannon. These guys seem to be enjoying themselves in vast devastation. Look at this. Look at that column. Look at the wall of the building. These aren't flimsy architecture, right? It's 1860s Atlanta. Look at the brick in here. If you can look over on the right-hand side, guys, you can see behind the outer stucco, you have layer upon layer of bricks. This is a massive, massive building. And Sherman just laid waste to anything in his way. The devastation is just unbelievable. And guys, that's why I say you have to watch this, because I'm just scrolling through some pictures and I'm going relatively quick just because I want to keep this relatively short. We're at an hour here already, and I'd like to get out in about 15-20 minutes. So keep this short for you all. But these are just some, and this is war, okay? So it makes sense. Civil War, right? But this is the waterfront is ablaze as the Union arrives. They set it aflame. They set Richmond on fire as they left. This is Portland, Maine, 1866. Just utter devastation. Look at that. The after effects. Looks like a bomb went off. Here we go. My favorite, Chicago, 1871. All right, we're going to go basically in hyperspeed here because I've showed you a lot of these pictures before. And some of them are in here multiple times also because they're just so unbelievable. I mean, you look at the devastation and you're telling me, and you look, guys, and the other thing to look at is what remains standing. And it's very interesting that in some of these photos, there are wood structures still standing while these massive brick buildings are in ruin. And why certain buildings were able to survive and others were not. Right? The courthouse, that's this famous picture here. These guys, again, just guys posing with the destruction. Why not? A little aerial photo here. Interested to know how they got this. But just look at the sheer devastation. Again, one guy, top hat, utter ruins. That's what we get here. And these are all Chicago, 1871. I mean, these people are just posing with the devastation. You look at it's turned to dust. These massive buildings are just gone. There's some piles of bricks and stuff, but for the most part, and you look at the illustrations here that they have, this city was on fire. It would have, if it was as it was said to have taken place, where the cow tipped over a candle, and it would have gradually spread, right? I mean, it literally could have spread like wildfire, like they say. But at the same time, you got to, with a fire like this, to have the whole city on fire like this all at once, it sounds like a little more than a cow tipping over a candle. I hate to say it. These guys are just rummaging through, right? You got a guy with a smile on his face. You always have one of these jerk offs with a smile on their face. I'm just happy to be here. I'm not going to play that movie because it's kind of dumb. It's a Chicago Fire movie. But you look at these people running out of the city while it's burning. And this is what's left, right? You have some little wood hut structures here in the middle. But for the most part, it's just stacks. Some sides of buildings. The guts of the cathedral. I mean, just pure and utter devastation. And this is a fire started by a cow, guys. I want to reiterate that. Look at all this damage and look at these buildings. Okay, look at the size of that building. Now, this is what I was talking about before. They said this fire spread from Michigan, which is in the middle here, to Wisconsin. That fire was blown over Lake Michigan. Riddle me that one, Batman. How does fire get blown across Lake Michigan? Either way, if it's coming from Michigan to Wisconsin or Wisconsin to Michigan. Okay, and let me reiterate, Peshtigo, 1.2 million acres burned, 1,500 to 2,000 dead. Great Michigan Fire, I was way off, 2.5 million acres burned, 200 to 1,000 killed. And if you look, the fires, guys, are all around the perimeter of the lakes, which makes no sense if these are just wind-based fires. There's nothing happening inland. right? Look at this. You have one out way out east by Detroit. You have one up north over here. Then you go out western Michigan. Then you go to southwestern Michigan. Then you go across Lake Michigan to Chicago. Then you go up the coast, the west coast of Lake Michigan, and you're going to run into Peshtigo, where there's all these fires on the same day, but they're not connected in any way, is what we're told. I mean, look at that, guys. Even the Peshtigo fire supposedly went across Green Bay. That's a story in itself. So look at Peshtigo afterwards. Look at that beautiful cathedral. I mean, just pure devastation. People don't know what's going on in the middle of the night. I mean, look at these maps, guys. Fires everywhere. Everywhere. Michigan, Wisconsin, and in just Chicago. No coincidence. Okay. It's just and again, we're not taught this stuff in school. Now, this is the Boston fire of 1872. This is another massive fire, and one that was mentioned in the Stolen History video, right? Again, the gentleman posing here, these are supposedly firemen, some of them in the background, but they're posing with the fire truck. Posing with the rubble here, hands in their pockets. You see a pattern here? These guys telling you, hey, yeah, we'll take control of it from here. Thanks, guys. This is ours now. We're going to redo this. Let's do a little remix here. Right? And that's what they're doing. They're just posing with their what they've done. This is all what they've done here. Look at all these proud men in their black hats. Just pure. Boston was just leveled. I mean, look at the debris piles. What's that? Probably 20 feet high. Look at the panorama of Boston. Just devastation. Pure and utter devastation. And we have the New York City fires of the 1880s. Again, people standing around watching while the city burns. Tombstone, Arizona here. City's burnt. Burnt to a crisp. You got maybe 2 structures that survived in this picture. And just a bunch of gentlemen out front standing and posing with it. This is an interesting one. We get into Krakatoa, right, in 1883. That's over in Indonesia. But I brought that up because that was just a massive flood, and it was a volcanic eruption, right? But it made the loudest sound ever known. It reverberated around the globe 7 times before going away. It could be heard at 4,000 miles away, and people with 100 miles away had permanent hearing loss. That's how crazy this volcanic eruption was. Krakatoa, 1883. Yeah. Loudest sound ever recorded. It's amazing. You know, it said the sound was so loud it ruptured eardrums of people 40 miles away from the explosion, and shockwaves circled the world 7 times. Wow. Think about how power, and that's in 1883, guys. That's something, again, like I'm saying, these are, freak events, but we don't see them nowadays. We haven't seen them since. Why did they happen then? Martha's Vineyard, major fire, 1883. 1885, we're looking at Galveston, Texas. Okay, now we're looking at some big mounds in 1889 in Missouri. And they would just destroy these mounds. This is the Johnstown flood, 1889. I mean, we're just looking at devastation after devastation in these towns and cities. Again, we get the people just posing on rooftops, crushed houses. Yep, we're just going to pose with this rubble. Why not? I guess it does give you some sort of scale of the vast. I mean, look at this picture. This is just like a neighborhood that's just been smashed together by floodwaters. Amazing. I think this is Seattle. Yeah, Seattle 1889. Again. And guys, they all look the same. It doesn't look just like a simple fire. It looks like it was bombed out. This looks like Dresden. This looks like London. Any of the areas that were bombed out in World War II. Now look at this. This is what I'm talking about. You got this jerk off in the foreground with his hands in his pockets, his bowler hat on, his big old mustache, and a little grin on his face. And in the background is just people wandering around in devastation. A couple other inheritors right behind him, smiling, posing with their horses. But it's unbelievable the amount of damage that was done by fire. I don't know. This is St. John's, right? We talked about this, and here's Fargo, North Dakota, 1893. Just leveled. Nothing. Springfield, 1902. This is Springfield again on the East Street shops. You see somebody spraying something on there, but the city's gone. Now we're going to get in 1904. Look at the devastation in Baltimore. Look at that. Just crunched metal. Look at the streets again. Does that look like a fire or a bombing? And there's just rubble everywhere, blown out buildings. But the poles are all standing. That's what I'm wondering. How would all these buildings burn? They were so hot, they blew out these brick buildings. But the street poles didn't burn. Makes you wonder, guys. You ever seen that in California? Right? Where some of the wildfires there, where the building is burned, the house is burned, but the trees on the property are untouched. Explain that. It just sounds like direct energy weapon. I mean, that's where we're headed with these. These sound like these are some sort of weapon. Now, this photo is interesting too, because it looks like they tried to play around with it because there's some clouds, but it also looks like there may have been some airships up here, and they doctored this photo a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. Some of the photos seem played with too. So is it possible they were using airships with direct energy weapons on them? I don't rule anything out at this point. And by direct energy weapon, it could be just simply a flamethrower of Greek fire, right? A dragon in the sky. Who knows? What do we have here? We're still in Baltimore. Okay, 1904. This city just took a beating. And look at the architecture still for Baltimore in 1904. I mean, this is beautiful buildings, guys. Look at those. And the rest they just took out, whether it was strategic or whether it was by happenstance. It's a tragedy. And just look at the devastation here. Buildings destroyed, people looking through the ruins. But the city's done. They're going to rebuild it with their way. They're going to find ways to make money off it. Again, another jerk off with his hands in his pockets and his bowler cap, and the middle of just a devastated area. And every fire we see these guys just posing like one of these African safari hunters, right? That poses with their kill. Let's see what we got here. We got a little San Francisco fire, 1906. The aftermath. So we're going down a street. There's people on the side. Buildings are all torn up and rubble all over the place. Bouldering buildings still, it looks like. Look at the architecture beautiful. And to think 1906, it's about 50 years after this city was supposedly founded, taken over from the Mexicans as part of California. And you have this. Look at this. I mean, look at those street corners, the lamppost, oh man, everything. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And then to see what we get afterwards sucks, right? I mean, this is the remains of City Hall in San Francisco. We're just looking at just pure devastation here. Tent City in the aftermath, right? But look at the mansions that weren't touched high up on the hill. Probably some of the robber barons' mansions, right? Amazing how they didn't get touched. But down here we got burnt stone and twisted steel. Seems strategic, guys. Seems like it was planned. It has a very 9/11 feel to it almost. Part of that reset. Indoctrination, introduction into the industrial age. And now we're being indoctrinated into the technocratic, I guess. I mean, we could go with the combination human technology. Yeah, I don't want to go there. So let's not. Let's stay here. But look at this damage in San Francisco, okay? Earthquake and fire, or similar weapon, or whatever happened in Chicago, Wisconsin, and Michigan in 1871. Again, just people posing, rubble. These are massive buildings. Look how thick the walls are. These were said to go up in record times, these buildings, according to the narrative. And look at the people just digging through the rubble, hoping to find anything, some belongings, right? Anything. Hopefully you don't find an arm or a leg or a baby or something. That would be awful. Ugh. But look at this. I mean, again, we're looking at, and this is a great picture. These people just having dinner, playing cards, rubble in the background. They're in the middle of the street, just enjoying life in the center of what looks like a war zone. I mean, yeah, just keep looking, guys. These pictures of San Francisco over and over. It's just burnt out or destroyed buildings. And this one kills me. Look at this jerk off, okay? Hands in his pockets, goofy bastard standing up on what appears to be the frame of a stone frame of an old building, ledge of some sort, next to some twisted metal. The rest of the city is just devastated. And he's just posing with it like, yep, this is great. This is a sad picture right here. These two ladies. This makes me, this sums it up for me right here. This lady in black right here, standing over the lady that's trying to clean it up. I feel like that's a perfect microcosm to what's going on right now. Is the men in black, the inheritors, the parasites, whatever you want to call them, are destroying the realm and leaving us to pick up the pieces. And it leads, that kind of reminds you of the whole Billy Joel song, right? We didn't start the fire. It's like we didn't cause these problems, but now we try to fix them and it doesn't work. It just keeps going on and on and on. It's like there's endless trauma that's going to take place in this realm. And yeah, I mean, you just look at San Fran, and this is an interesting picture because supposedly one website said this is a doctored image, that this tower wasn't really like this. Now, I find that interesting because this is supposedly from someone's slide, right? It's from a negative. So I don't know. I've seen a couple different versions of it. This kid right here kills me too. Look at this dude. Looks like a little orphan just posing. This is the poster child, right, for the aftermath. No parents, just hanging out in the rubble. Will get picked up by some pedo, put to work. Right, so the rumor is this picture is doctored. That tower was not like that. I don't know. This picture right here, doctored supposedly. I don't know if I believe it because I've seen too many pictures like that. There's a tipped over train in San Francisco with a girl and her dog just looking around. You know, guys, we're just looking at more damage, destruction over and over. But again, the mansions survive. Amazing. Look at that. It's almost like a line right at that street line. Nope, everything from here up is good. Everything from there down, you're gone. And that's how it works in this realm, people. Once you realize it. Now we're going to go to Seattle again, 1907. Now this is interesting. Look at the mounds of dirt in Seattle in 1907. What caused these? Why are they there? Right? Let me just look at Seattle after the great. Look at this. They have a vast underground network, which is very interesting because one of the other areas near the New Madrid earthquake is Kansas City, Missouri, which has a vast network of underground tunnels too, which is very interesting. Look at these buildings. Are they digging them out? Looks like it. All right, and this is, 1915, okay. And this is just Crystal Palaces they burnt down, okay. I mean, it's you name it, they burnt it down. The World's Fairs, Crystal Palaces, hotels, any old structure. Look at this. You got these beautiful columns. Boom, done. And these didn't go down easy. This is supposedly the Palace of Fine Arts. And my buddy Casey and I are going to get into this one because this picture right here is interesting. This is supposedly them demoing it so they could rebuild it. I don't know. We'll see. It's a very interesting picture because you got more guys standing around. One guy videoing down here at the bottom. This is them destroying the arch in San Fran. Okay. And we just look at the just utter devastation around the world. Okay, so that's basically what I wanted to show you. I wanted to give you a look at some of these pictures and everything like that. Oh, do we have another? Okay, yeah, here's one last video and we will get out of here.
Empty cities of the American West, as the repopulation took quite a while. Complete destruction of Tartaria and a couple other free empires and kingdoms. Cataclysm in the Northern Hemisphere, almost complete destruction of the northern areas of the world, suggesting a natural cataclysm or weapon of enormous power. Massive destruction of Roman-style cities in North America to support the concept that North America was only inhabited by primitive natives. Industrialization and robber barons to reintroduce stolen knowledge, full effect of industrialization not felt until the 1840s. Worldwide coordinated effort of running the world fairs to bring the stolen knowledge to the masses first started around 1860. Lunatic asylums to control the dissidents and those in shock first came up around 1800 to 1840. Modern medicine and education as crowd control, mandatory schooling emanating from Europe in the 18th century. Orphan trains and church-run foundling business to repopulate the depopulated areas of the world. Tasking Freemasons to organize the free post-reset masonry. Modern science is being forced on the population. People always rejected the nihilistic science and wanted to reconnect to the spiritual traditions of old, but this was actively prevented and still is. Central banking was created to control the economy on a central level. Clash between communism and fascism and the two world wars to destroy the traditional way of life in Europe and Asia.
And there you have it, folks. That sums it up in a nutshell right there, right? It's just been a destruction, Europe, Asia, North America, over the last 150 years. And I don't know. I don't know what happened. And that's what I need you guys to do. I need you guys to look into this stuff too. Okay. I need you to dig, go through the old books, old photos, see what you can find. Look at old articles on different weapons, possible frequency weapons, Greek fire. Look into different things like liquefaction that can happen after earthquakes. Look at lahars that can happen after volcanoes, and all these things. You start piecing them together and they start coming together and showing what some of the possibilities were that led to some of this destruction. And a lot of it points to not being natural. Okay. And that's the point of that. That's the gist of the whole thing. So with that said, that's going to be it for tonight. I definitely want to do a couple more like this where we just kind of free ball, go through some pictures, go through some videos, hit up some articles, things like that. I want to hit up the orphan trains and asylums. That's why I kind of ended with that video, because that's a whole nother element to this, is the reshuffling of the population. And I want to get into that. This was just about the destruction of the buildings and things and the infrastructure that was here beforehand. And we'll get into some other things. We got orphan trains. We got, we can look into the Civil War. We can look into the railroads. We can dig into those Peshtigo fires some more. There's so many different things, guys. We can look at Tunguska, that which happened in Russia. And like I said, coming up, be ready, because my buddy Casey is stoked about this, as am I. We're gonna break down San Francisco and really dig through it with a fine-tooth comb. Try and figure out what the hell is going on there. And here's the thing. We already know the narrative's bullshit, because H.H. Bancroft got called out by the Society of California that his history of California was twisted, was bullshit. They called it garbage. They wanted to throw him out of the society for what he wrote about California. And he wrote most of the history of the United States, or at least for the West and for the Native Americans. So we know there's bullshit out there. It's our job not to necessarily prove the truths, right? But to eliminate the lies. And as we eliminate the lies, we can start to see the truth. All right, guys, if you want to support, go join that Patreon, patreon.com/Great Deception Podcast. I have a YouTube. We have merch in the merch store. You can get a nice t-shirt like this one here, Make the Old World Great Again, or the Great Deception Podcast Question Everything shirts. We got ladies gear in there too. We got hoodies. We have mugs. Go check it out. Support the show. Rock your gear. As always, stay strong and question everything.